Morning everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of On the Whistle, where we're going to be chatting about Sunderland 0, Sporting Lisbon 1, and having a look at all your questions and chatting through all the big talking points as ever. A bit of an odd game to discuss, and although Sunderland lost, I actually thought there were big positives really to come from both halves. Obviously, Regis Bris, as usual, in this early stage of pre-season, giving two teams 45 minutes. The first half, again, the kind of stronger of the two teams, if you like, the more experienced of the two teams. And although they lost the half 1-0, I thought they pretty much dominated the game. The goal obviously is a really sloppy one in terms of, I think the goalkeeper probably should do better. Clearly the defence gets caught out way too easily with a pretty routine long ball forward. But it's the kind of error that I don't expect to see happen in the season and to be dealt with a lot better. And other than that, I thought that Sunderland created the better chances. You know, they weren't sort of huge clear-cut chances, but there were some really good openings, and I thought they quite consistently opened Benfica up with the speed and the quality of their interplay. And speaking to Bris afterwards, I think he was really positive and really encouraged by the fact that so many of these players are playing together for the first time, and yet they're showing a pretty good understanding, especially in that midfield three. Yet again, you know, on another day, Eliza Mayenda maybe a little bit sharper, a little bit more up to match fitness, takes one of those chances. A couple of lovely bits of play to kind of set him up. Enzo Lafayette, you'd expect, very heavily involved in that. And Sunderland come away with, you know, a couple of goals against a really strong opposition. And I think that's what's worth pointing out here. You know, Sevilla had a tough season last year and didn't have a great time in La Liga, rotated their squad heavily on Saturday. This was pretty much Sporting Lisbon's full-strength team. They have the Super Cup against Benfica literally this time next week, so this is a big game for them right on the eve of their season. They're pretty much ready to go. So for Sunderland to compete so impressively, I think is a huge positive. Now the second half, obviously Sporting dominated the ball and were the better team, but against a young, you know, inexperienced Sunderland side, I think you would expect that to happen. And although they did have the better of it, they didn't create loads and loads of chances. So I think Sunderland's young sort of team in the second half can take some confidence really from the way they dug in and the way they limited them, kept their shape, kept their discipline. For sure, lacked a little bit of quality in the final third, and that's why they weren't able to really work the opposition goalkeeper. But definitely plenty of positives. As I say, it was, you know, Bris never gets too carried away and win or a defeat, but he definitely was encouraged by what he saw last night and feels his team's making some good progress. So listen, I think it's very obvious watching this team at the moment that the depth isn't there where it needs to be for a long Premier League season. There's still a lot of positions in this team to fill, whether it's through new signings or players coming back from injury. It's clearly a little bit of a concern now that we're only just under 3 weeks away from the West Ham game. But I think the players that are here and the team that is in place, I think has shown some good signs. And I think that, as I say, the quality of the play in possession was quite exciting to see, especially that midfield three, who, to be honest, looked like they've been playing together for quite a long time, which clearly isn't the case. So let's have a look through some of your questions. Elias says, if Jensen Seelt keeps playing well, will the hierarchy think twice about potential centre-back dealings, or is the plan to send him out on loan regardless of performances to gain experience? So I think it's a really good question, Elias, because I thought Jensen Seelt was one of the big positives from the game again last night. Apart from maybe Enzo Lafayette, I think I would probably have made him my player of the first half. I thought he was excellent. Really looks to have used his time out in forced absence through injury really well. He's a big guy now and he uses his frame really well, but his quality in possession was excellent against a strong team, whether it's playing a pass through the lines into the midfield or out wide, or whether it's driving forward himself to make something happen. Really exciting, and I think he's starting to look like a prospect. I actually asked Bris about this after the game, and he sort of just said that they weren't going to rush into a decision. He was really pleased to have Seelt, because obviously someone he didn't have last season. Thinks he's making really good progress, and that's obviously really encouraging. But I think they're just going to give him a little bit more time. I think it's obvious at the moment they can't afford to lose him with there being so little depth at centre-back. And so I expect that he'll play the next few games and Sunderland will just make a decision close at the end of the window. I think Sunderland will recruit at centre-half either way. I think that's obvious. I think they want a real proven top-level defender, not necessarily in the Premier League level, but sort of a top European defender, and I expect them to invest fairly significantly in that if they can. So my gut says there's still a decent chance that Seelt goes out on loan towards the end of the window, because I think the most important thing for him this season is minutes. I think after so long out of the game, he just needs to be playing, and especially at his age, he needs to be experienced in senior football. So I still think that's the most likely outcome, but there's no need to rush into a decision. He can just sort of keep getting these opportunities, keep getting these minutes under his belt, while Sunderland's squad's still coming together. And you know, on the evidence of the last couple of days, there's absolutely no reason why he can't can't show that he's sort of good enough to play a part at least. But I think the important thing either way is for him to get minutes. Okay, so question here from Stephen, who says, early days obviously, but out of the new signings, who has impressed you the most and why? I think it's been pretty encouraging across the board, really. I don't know if I'm allowed to say Enzo Lafay, it feels like cheating a little bit, but his performances across the 2 games, well, and South Shield as well, I have to say have been so exciting, playing in his best position. I think you can see a huge difference from the player who we saw last season on the left wing, who even then was excellent at times. Just at the heart of everything good against strong opposition, he still looks just as good as he did at his best last season. Makes chances, works really hard as well, wins the ball back sometimes with his pressing. I actually think someone might have ended up getting a bit of a bargain with him. It seems strange to say when they've spent so much money, but sometimes I can't quite believe he's a Sunderland player. Really just love watching him play, and I think he looks bang at it. I think Talby was much better last night, which was encouraging. Looks to be settling, looks to be sort of getting more involved in the game, which I think is a promising sign. But clearly he is the most inexperienced of the new players, and I think that shows a little bit. But some promising signs. Diarra and Siddiqui being impressed with them both. I think Siddiqui, answer your question, Stephen, is probably the one who's impressed me the most, just because he's the Diarra I kind of expected to look really good because of the level he's played at in League One, and because of the money that Sunderland have spent. I sort of expected a strong established player, and that's what he looks like. He's got a real good engine, gets forward really well. It's a bit of a threat in the final third actually. Siddiqui I didn't know quite so much about, and although the Belgian league is a good standard, wasn't quite sure how that would translate early days, but I think he's got a bit of quality, and as I've said all week, great character and so much energy, so lots of encouragement there. And Adingra, pretty much what we expected, a real live wire out on the left. It's got some quality, can make something happen. So I have to say, I think it looks pretty promising across the board, Stephen, I really do. But if I had to go for one, I'd either go for Siddiqui or Enzo. Let's see what other questions we have here. Yeah, David says, anything to worry about regarding Huggins and Isidore, or is RLB just managing their minutes? Yeah, so Huggins and Isidore not involved. Asked about this after the game. Nothing much to worry about, David, thanks for your question. Huggins is, as Bris explained to me afterwards, they've now trained for 8 consecutive days. It's obviously been a really intense camp, and the feeling was that, you know, Huggins was, to use the old term, was in the red zone a little bit, a lot of stress and a lot of strain on his body. And I think they felt that there was a little bit of a risk of an overload if he played again a second time in 3 days. So I think they just made the decision to just take him out of the firing line and give him a bit of a rest. I'd be stunned if he wasn't involved at Hearts. So yeah, I think it's just being cautious really, given what he's been through of late. Isidore took a kick to his knee on Saturday. I noticed a little bit actually in the second half he was hobbling at times, but he did finish the game, so clearly no major issue. He did a bit of training yesterday, but then he was still feeling a little bit of stiffness on the morning of the game, so again someone just decided not to include him. No injury real worry as such, and I think they'll both be back at the weekend, so yeah, it's something just being cautious. I asked about the other players who were absent after the game. Bris gave me a little wrap up. Reynaldo, they want sort of 7 or 10 days training before they start integrating him into the team, so I think he'll probably miss the Hearts game, potentially the whole game as well, and then maybe be back for Real Betis at the Stadium of Light, but obviously that depends on everything progressing. Regan Patterson, again absent, but should be back pretty soon, have a chance of making the Hearts game, hopefully make the whole game, definitely be back for the last few games of pre-season, so again, nothing major to worry about there. Okay, so we've got a few questions around the same kind of topic, which I'll have a little chat about now. This is also from David, who says, judging by the team selection, is Dan Neil going to be starting from the bench, do you think? Stefan says, is Dan Neil's contract situation changing his status in the squad? And SCFC says, any thoughts on Dan Neil potentially being in the second 11 currently? Quite a big call considering he's the team captain, but obviously there is the contract uncertainty. I think I'm not convinced it has a great deal to do with the contract situation. I think Neil's here, he loves the club, he's incredibly driven, he's still wearing the captain's armband when he's playing. I still think that's something that will probably get resolved at some point. I'm not sure it's too big a factor. I think it's a little bit of a funny one at the moment, because although Bris is clearly prioritising that first 11, if you like, he needs enough experience in the second half team to ensure that they can be competitive against what is pretty good opposition. So I think a few players have had to go into that team to ensure that balance is right. And I think that, you know, the brief was very clear to me on Saturday, which was, yes, I'm focusing on the core of the team in terms of that first half side, but there are a few players in that second half team who could clearly start the first day of the season against West Ham. Dan Neil is one of those, and Patrick Roberts is absolutely the other. I actually would really like to see these guys get a chance in the more experienced team in the next couple of games, because I think it's really difficult for them to show their best kind of football in a team that is probably weaker than the opposition and isn't seeing much of the ball. Does feel a little bit harsh sometimes, although obviously they'll understand why it is. I still think both guys have got a chance of starting the season, especially on the right. As I say, Talby has really got something, a lot of talent, but he's still quite inexperienced, and I think Roberts still has a chance of getting in that team. And I'd say the same for Dan Neil. I think it's pretty obvious it's going to be difficult. I think it's pretty obvious at the moment that Siddiqui, Diarra and Lafay look like they're going to be the midfield three. But it's, as I've said before, it's a long season. Some of these guys are going to go into the African Cup of Nations. There's going to be injuries at some point. There's going to be dips in form. If Dan Neil is still here this season, which at the moment I still think he will be, although of course there is that uncertainty, we have to recognise that. I still think he'll play loads of football, and I still think he'll have a huge part to play this season, but there's no doubt at the moment that if you had to predict who would start the season, it would be Siddiqui and Diarra and Lafay. But as I say, I hope Neil kind of gets a chance to show what he's about in the more experienced side, if you like, between now and the start of the season. What's really interesting is we know the links with Granit Xhaka don't go away, which makes you think that Sunderland are looking at signing another midfielder. It becomes an incredibly competitive group then, and really hard for all those players to get minutes, so it's going to be a really interesting one to watch. But for sure, yeah, at the start of the summer I would have assumed Dan Neil was going to be in that team at the start of the season. Now I'm not so sure, but yeah, I still think he's going to get plenty of football. That's my kind of take on it. Stephen, on a similar note, says, do you think Miranda is now firmly RLB's #1 striker ahead of Isidore, and is he ready to lead the line in the Premier League? I think Miranda's a massive talent, and I think that's what this kind of whole model is about, and I think you've got to give him an opportunity in the Premier League. Personally, I think he'll thrive. I think he's been a real nuisance in these two games. He hasn't looked out of his depth against these sort of top-level defenders at all. The finishing hasn't quite been there, but when he's a little bit sharper, I've got no doubt it will be. Miranda's someone who I think Sunderland have to give a big opportunity to, because I think they have a massive prospect on their hands. In terms of the Isidore thing, I think, to be honest, I think Miranda had probably nudged ahead towards the end of last season. I think we started to see that, just because of how hard he is to defend against, how good his all-round play is. Isidore still has a lot to offer because he's so quick and his finishing's good, and I think especially with Sunderland likely to play a more counter-attacking style next season, I think that's potentially going to be absolutely invaluable. So I don't think it's kind of definitely set, Stephen, but if I had to make a prediction now on who would start the season against West Ham, I would go with Miranda, and to be honest, he's not a player who I have concerns about stepping up, Stephen. I think he's going to be excellent, and I think he's going to do fine. Doesn't mean that Sunderland won't sign another striker, they might well do, but I just think Miranda's got a big part to play, and yeah, at the moment, no slight on Isidore, who's going to get a lot of minutes and going to have a huge role to play, but I think Miranda probably is nudging ahead. So, here's an interesting question from Glenn. He says, any update on Pierre Ekwah? Some reports say he joined St Etienne, nothing official, wasn't in the team against Gateshead. Yeah, I don't know exactly what's happened, Glenn, but I can give you a little bit of an overview. So my understanding is that St Etienne did trigger their clause in time to make him their player, to obviously a pretty good fee from a Sunderland perspective. I think it was in the region of €6 million. Now some of that will go to West Ham because of the sell-on clause. But yeah, that's why he didn't come back to Sunderland. That's why he wasn't involved with those French players in Gateshead, because essentially he isn't really Sunderland's player anymore. That option has been triggered, and therefore it's only a matter of time. Now, obviously, I don't have the sources at St Etienne in France, so I can't tell you exactly what's gone on at the other end. As far as I'm aware, the deal was just being held up by some kind of technicalities at the St Etienne end in terms of getting that all confirmed, which meant that, you know, Sunderland could then announce it. Speaking to some people in France who I know, they were kind of saying that there is some chatter that Ekwah could be sold on pretty quickly, that there's some top level interest, I think, from Spain as well as France, which Ekwah would be quite keen to pursue. So I don't know if that kind of chain of events is complicating things a little bit. That's me speculating, that's not me giving you facts, so please don't take it as that. But yeah, basically the reason there's been no update, Glenn, and why nobody's seen him is because from a Sunderland perspective, he isn't really their player anymore. As I say, they're just waiting for all the technicalities and formalities to be sorted. It's odd that it's taken so long, but I think from Sunderland's perspective, it's just a matter of when rather than if, really, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, I'll try and get an update for you at that at some point, Glenn, and get back to you. But as far as I'm aware, the option was triggered. It's just been all the formalities that have taken longer than expected. But that's certainly why he hasn't been back on Wearside and involved in any of the games. So we've got a question here from Chris, who says, now you've seen a few games, Phil, have you changed your mind on the future of some of the players you initially made before a ball was kicked? Any more of the fringe players surprised you may end up in the Premier League squad? Well, I think the obvious ones I mentioned, Chris, was Seelt. I think it's important not to get carried away by pre-season too much, but as I say, he's undeniably been very, very, very good. And I think he'll have opportunities in the next couple of games to kind of underline that and really show that he can play a part. We'll see on that. Otherwise, Huggins would be an obvious one again, who looks sharp, really encouraging that he's made such a strong return from injury, and given the injuries elsewhere in the squad, I think he's got a real chance. So there's two. I would say as well that I don't think they'll be part of the Premier League squad this season, because I just think they need regular senior football. But I like what I see from Abdullahi and Milan Alexic. I think they've both got something. Abdullahi's quick, strong, makes things happen. Alexic is so quick. I think it's a really underrated part of his game. Does some good stuff. He just lacks that little bit of consistency in his end product. So both those players, Chris, I think it could be quite exciting players for Sunderland in the future. But I do think for now, to be fair, they're players who probably need a loan deal. So we're going to finish with transfers, obviously. Plenty of transfer questions. So Alan says, how many more signings do you think we need? I think a goalkeeper, 2 centre-backs and a striker. And Charlie says, what positions are we actively looking at transfer-wise? How many will we bring in? Road Park Legend says, how many more signings do you think we will make? So they're definitely still doing work to try and sign another goalkeeper. That's something that's been pretty clear to me from my conversations, people inside and outside the club for a while now. Bris basically confirmed that to me last night. They still want another left winger, or a versatile winger who can play off both sides. That's probably a better way to describe it, because of obviously the Loriente deal falling through. I think the feeling is that they need some more cover. Obviously Adingra will be on the African Cup of Nations. Talbi, as I mentioned, is quite young and experienced, might take a little bit of time to really settle. So they're definitely looking at another winger. Hang on, let me just count as I go through. Clearly at least one centre-back is a massive priority, potentially 2. And they're still looking at a midfielder. That's obvious, and I still think there's a chance, although it's been a little bit quieter around of a striker. So I think I'd probably go to 5 or 6 there. I think that sounds a bit about right when the players who from injured come back as well. So still a huge amount of work to be done to get this squad Premier League ready, to be fair. But as I reflect on the trip, I think there's loads of positives. I think there's a good team that can potentially be competitive coming together here and making really good progress. Still a lot of hard work to be done, but the signs are pretty encouraging. So there we go, 18 minutes. I think I should probably stop there. Again, thanks so much for watching everything and reading everything this week. There's going to be loads of stuff on the Sunderland website the next couple of days, and I might do another video reflecting on the tour as a whole over the next couple of days. So please stay tuned for that. And again, thanks for all the support. Thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you very soon.